Cha. Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me. Who's got you? I can't.
Yeah, I can do that. It's interesting. Adam Christianson is here with us, everybody. Adam Christianson, he is the host of the MacCast, online at MacCast.com, and you can follow him on Twitter, MACCAST, MacCast. And I feel like there's something I'm leaving out. Available wherever you get podcasts. That was the other thing I meant to say as well. Right. Great stories can change the world. So said Tim Cook when he introduced Apple TV Plus. It's interesting because you said we might have an iPhone 13 with a smaller notch. Did you hear the whole thing about the last episode of Ted Lasso?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where
the
looks
graphics
like
department just did some weird stuff to the screen and everybody freaked out.
Yeah, it looked like I think it was the Hannah Waddingham character, Rebecca. It looked like she was using an iPhone that doesn't have a notch, and everybody's like, she's using an iPhone 13 and there's no notch. And it's like, it could just be Hollywood magic where you unfortunately could see the string. I had a weird question for you today, and the answer, well, I didn't ask you whether Apple could save the world, because I don't think Apple can save the world. The question I asked actually was, how could Apple save the world? Or maybe we could talk about ways that Apple could save the world. Now, this is born of a couple of things for me. I've told this story here before. I was having dinner with a VC a few years ago, and she was livid about Apple. Apple's just sitting on all of its money, not doing anything. And that's because Richard Branson was trying to get to space at the time, and Jeff Bezos was trying to get to space at the time, and Elon Musk was trying to get to space at the time, and Apple wasn't leaving the planet. And I argued that Apple
has she seen their campus?
Well, I mean, it's just a campus, though. I mean, it just sits there. And by the way, nobody has seen their campus unless they have an Apple lanyard or they're a member of the press, because you're not allowed to go onto it. But I digress.
It could take off at any minute.
It does. That's true.
Their play.
Here's the thing, though. She actually thought that what Amazon was doing and what Virgin was doing and what Tesla, SpaceX were doing was sort of furthering the human condition more by trying to get us off the planet. And I argued that what Apple was doing in healthcare was actually, not necessarily more important, but Tim Cook goes outside, he looks up, he sees Amazon flying overhead, he sees Virgin flying overhead, he sees, SpaceX flying overhead, and then he looks down and he sees a guy who missed his insulin shot for whatever reason, right? He looks down and he sees health problems, around like everybody, and that's sort of where Apple was putting some of their stuff. Certainly, you could argue what they're doing with the Racial Equity and Justice Initiative. Certainly, you could argue some of their educational stuff with the developer academies that they're opening across the country and around the world. Granted, that benefits Apple too, but at least people learn skills and things like that. I'm curious, is there a place that you see Apple doing well? Is there a thing that you would like to see Apple do instead? Do you think this is the stuff of government and big business should stay out of it? Do you think it's the stuff of big business and government should stay out of it? What's your take on what Apple could do to make the world a better place?
That's funny that you say all that, because that was pretty much my notes. Like,
oh, okay.
Should Apple have to do this? I think they do a great job. And you mentioned like a number of the initiatives. The other one is all of their green initiatives in terms of, recycling and building robots and solar powering their using green energy as much as possible. And we don't have to get into the whole, like how they're neutral and that sort of stuff and carbon offsets, because that gets all weird, right? Yeah. But I mean, they're doing a lot of things to try and do exactly that. And I would argue that they don't have to do any of it, right? So they're doing that on their own with, I think, out a lot of pressure from the outside. I think these are things that they feel are right to do. And I think that's great and should be applauded. And I think they're setting a great example, and other corporations should absolutely be following. And all these things are super, super awesome. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know that it's up to corporations to save us. Like, I feel like that's, again, we might have to argue because they're not doing it, but that feels like the world that we have governments and global leaders, and these people are supposed to be doing those sorts of things. But like, I don't want to get too depressed, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But like, I feel like that's like where it should be. Now, that said, to answer your question, how could Apple save the world? Because I think it's an interesting one. The one area that I think they could be doing more, I just don't know how they do this with the way our world and our systems are set up, is to stop manufacturing or changing their manufacturing processes in dealing with countries that have oppressive political and social systems. Like, I would love
just
to
say
see them,
China. Just say China.
but it's not just China. Like, they do business in a lot of countries, that are probably not doing great for their workers and their workforce and their people. China's probably the biggest example, but I mean, we could talk about a lot of countries. But that gets very complex very, very quickly, especially when you have fiduciary responsibilities and corporate responsibilities, at a different level. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, they could take the high road and say, we're moving all our manufacturing. And the thing is where do you take it? Do you bring it to the United States? Is that better? I haven't thought about those things, right?
Right.
where is better, or where does it just look different?
Well,
right?
part of the problem, it seems to me, is Apple doesn't do a whole lot of manufacturing on their own. I mean, you do have TSMC opening those 5 chip fabs in Arizona, but I think I heard that the first one is going to be for the 7 nanometer process, and I doubt that there's anything that Apple does that actually uses the 7 nanometer process anymore.
Right.
I could be wrong about that, but Apple is down to the 5 nanometer, and they're eyeing the 3 in 2023, is what people say, and that's not coming out of Yuma, or whatever city in Arizona it is that the factories are going to be.
Right.
There's talk that some of the production that was supposed to happen in Vietnam this fall is not happening in Vietnam anymore because they've had an upswing in COVID cases. Which I would imagine, I don't know because we don't get anything like real information from China, but I would imagine there's an upswing in COVID cases in China as well. But China will just lock up a city, and I don't mean to make light of that, but I mean, we won't hear how things are actually going in China, but China will go ahead and keep producing chips. China will go ahead and keep cranking out phones because that's what they want more than other stuff.
They could be doing, they do a lot in terms of their monitoring, in terms of their reports that they do and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, right, they are working with these other companies that operate in countries where they operate under completely different rules. And Apple has to do that to stay competitive, quote unquote. You could argue they have so much money, they probably could still stay competitive and take less of a profit margin. But again, that's where it starts to get in these complex things of they have shareholders, they're a public company, all these things go hand in hand. So I don't know what the solution is. I think Apple could figure it out if they really wanted to, probably. I think they have enough money and enough smart people and can hire enough smart people to probably do something in that arena. And maybe that makes the world better. But again, I don't know at the end of the day, it's Apple's job as a corporation to be the carrier of that.
Well, it's got to be somebody's. I mean, not to sound awful about it, but, and I'm not saying, I mean, you kind of want Apple to be that because they have the money and because it's part of their image, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I was very excited when they opened their clinic for their own employees because I thought, oh, that would be interesting. And they could learn a lot of stuff about, actually managing healthcare, and maybe they could roll that out to other people. And then there was a story recently. It wasn't well sourced, so I don't think I did it on macOS Ken, but it sounds like, based on this one report or a couple of reports, like they're actually going to be closing down that clinic.
Yeah, I read that too.
I don't know what that means. And the problem is any really big initiative is hampered right now by COVID-19, right? Any huge thing that you had that you were going to try to do that was completely, this is a new and different thing and there are well-established ways, but we think we can do it better. It kind of got torpedoed in like March or April of 2020, I think. I'm not saying that's what caused it, but you can't look at healthcare today and say this is how this works, because right now I mean, we're on wave 4 here in the States. You have hospitals once again saying we don't have enough beds. You have stories of people being flown 150 miles to go someplace else. I don't think now is the best time to reinvent healthcare because there are too many people just trying to navigate what is currently. But it was really disappointing to hear, if it is true that they did close that, because then the associated thing that came out with that was if it had gone well, they were looking at rolling it out wider. And it's not like I think Apple could necessarily do better. I was just excited that there was somebody who was actually trying to do it, in a hopefully better and different way, because I haven't had a good health provider in a very long time, or one that I actually appreciated working with. I've got health insurance, and the one time I've had to go to the doctor in the past year and a half, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was very difficult. I ended up basically having to find my own thing and finding out whether they worked, even though I'd actually called my health provider directly to say, where's the nearest and how can I and all that stuff. So it was exciting to hear that they might be able to do that. It's disappointing to hear that they're apparently not trying it after all.
I guess there's not much money in it.
Yeah, right. There's not much money in healthcare. No. I honestly, the thing that I go back to, and I know this is crazy, I go back to the great stories can change the world thing. It may sound nuts, but honestly, one of the best things that they've done in the past couple of years may truly, honestly be Ted Lasso. Not just because it was a funny show, not just because it was a good show, but you have people talking about, talking about humanity, talking about morality. You have people talking about feeling better, which, and I mean, could Apple TV Plus be a thing for that? It feels crazy to say that, but as we discussed earlier this week, I also did a Star Trek podcast for 7 years. I mean, there's something to messaging. There's something to storytelling as well. Although I don't think Hollywood's going to save us. I think there's a better shot of Apple saving us I think there's a better shot of Lassie saving us than all of them. But then maybe it's Apple, and then I'm going to put Hollywood at 9th.